I just had a great conversation with my dear friend Nick Vipperman. He's the pastor of our church here in Jefferson, Georgia, Galilee Christian Church, and a lot of talk about faith, how to implement faith into our everyday life, how to help transfer faith from one generation to the next, some advice on sharing our faith and growing in our faith. Really, really fun conversation. I hope you find a lot of nuggets, a lot of wisdom from it. So please enjoy the rest of this episode. Welcome to Belief Builders. I'm Matthew Eford. Join me as I sit down with individuals who have found strength, direction, and purpose through their faith. We'll look at the moments that tested their beliefs, the experiences that strengthened them, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Join us as we build our faith one conversation at a time. Nick, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Nick has the opportunity to get to know you through our church at Galilee Christian Church here in Jefferson, Georgia. You're our pastor. I consider you a dear friend, and I really appreciate you jumping on with me this morning to talk a little bit about your faith, how you came to faith, and try to inspire us as all of us seek to grow and learn in our faith.
I'm honored to be with you, Matthew. Appreciate your leadership, here in our church and our community, in your home. I know you're a leader in all those ways. And so thank you for feel honored to being asked to be a part of it, man.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. Well, Nick, just kind of starting off, share with us kind of how your faith journey began.
Yeah. Wow. I think how I've come to faith, or how I came to faith, and thinking about where I am from where I started, and having a little bit of perspective of what I've kind of come through. A lot of people would say, and this is not an effort to pat myself on the back, I just think a lot of people would say my path has been non-traditional. You can track my faith story all the way back to when I was 4 years old and my father left home. I was an only child, but left my mom and I. And so I was, again, raised in that way, that, son of a single mom, and that whole part of that process, and sort of the pain and the challenge that comes with that when you're a kid and you're growing up. But my mom did have me in church basically every Sunday. But her tradition was the Anglican Episcopal tradition.
Okay.
So I grew up in that church, and especially at least where I was, that was a very stoic tradition. And quite frankly, at least in my, interactions with it, wasn't a very, I don't remember ever seeing a Bible in my whole time there.
Okay. Wow.
I'm sure that at some point when I was in a Sunday school class or something, someone had a Bible, but we didn't have a Bible. We didn't have a Bible in our home that I recall. And I don't remember there being Bibles in the pews there. It was much more the Book of Common Prayer.
Okay.
And all of that, I never really connected with Jesus. I kind of went to church because mom took me, like a lot of kids when they're growing up. I went because she was going, and I mean, what else was I going to do, right? She told me we were
Same
going,
with me. Yeah.
I got in the car and I went, right? So that was the first part of sort of my faith journey. What I will say is, looking back on it, I'm very thankful for a godly mother that loved God and loved me and had a desire to raise me right, if you will. So I'm thankful for that part of it. But just the truth of the matter is, it didn't connect with my heart. I started going to youth group with a good friend of mine named Brandon when I was in very early high school. I was a freshman, and he invited me to come to his church, our little church in our little community called Horse Pasture, Virginia, which is a heck of a name, I know. So he invited me to come to church, and I did, and started doing their youth group on Sunday nights. So I would go with my mom on Sunday mornings, and then would go to their youth group time on Sunday night, and I went every Sunday with him. And we had a great youth minister. So that was super helpful. And that really kind of poured into me.
Sure.
And we went from there.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so that starting to go with him, and then being in a church where the Bible was very upfront. There were Bibles that were taught from, and I could start to read and understand a lot of it myself. and be taught it and have some real clarity. I'm sure part of that too is the age,
Sure.
my age, that I was getting to a place where I could understand it better. And so that was good. And then at some point in there, it really started to connect with me, and I really believed, and I started going to church camp and doing all those things with them. Then I started going more on Sunday mornings and kind of stopped going with mom. I'm sure for her, she didn't love that, but she was also glad that I was going, and so that was good.
Sure.
At some point in there, I made a decision to fully give my life to Christ. Said, "Hey, mom, I want to be baptized," and she said, "No, you've already been baptized." In her mind, when I was sprinkled as a baby. And so it took me a year of walking with her through that. And that's one of the best things she ever did for me, because she really made me sort of prove it to her, chapter and verse, if you will, of why this was something that was so important to me.
Sure. Yeah, I love
And
that.
that really, it was formational, spiritually forming for me, that I had to go down that road and walk with her through, okay, well, here's what I see, and here's what scripture says, and here's what we have in the New Testament record of people when they're making decisions to follow Jesus. This is what they did. And, yes, we're saved by our faith, but don't you see the critical nature of this? Because otherwise, why would it be there? And why would we have all this New Testament example?
Sure.
So it's kind of a longer story, but eventually she was there on the Sunday I was baptized, and that was awesome. And the longer story made longer is that years from then, I got to baptize my own mom
That's
in my church.
fantastic. Yeah, I love
So,
that.
so again, kind of a long story, but just awesome to see how that journey went. And mom started coming to my church, and my church being, of course, the church where I was preaching, is it's the Lord's church.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. The
But you
church
know
you were
what I mean.
serving at.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I
So,
love that. I love that she was part of that process for you, right? That
right.
she, I was blessed with parents that took me to church from the days we could be there, right? As soon as we could darken the doors, we were there. And I'm so thankful for that upbringing. But I love the fact that she made you, kind of more tested you in that. Is this
Mhm.
something that just your friends are doing? Or is this something that you feel really called to do? And I love that piece.
Yeah, I think that was exactly her mindset of, is this just more that the friends you're so close with and you're interacting with them and you just kind of want to fit in? Or is this something that's really matters to you? Because her faith really did matter to her.
Sure.
It did. And so it wasn't because she, having lack of sincerity or attention to it. It was, it was what she wanted for me too. But she knew I had to get there. I had to get there on my own in some ways. And
I
so,
love that. So there's so many ways I want to take this conversation. As a
yeah.
pastor, like how did you discern God's call in your life? When did you feel
Mm.
called into full-time vocational ministry? How did you discern that call?
Yeah, man. It really boils down pretty simply that I had that godly, caring, loving, attentive example of a great youth minister, a man that loved the Lord, loved us as students, poured into us. We would be, and his name was Tim Hunt. We would be at Tim's house multiple days of the week. He had a little parsonage type house that was a part of the church, sort of a part of the church campus. And at some point when we first got there, remember, this is the early 90s. This is the Jordan years, the
Okay.
Bulls. And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
we're all very much into basketball. It's Virginia, but it's basically North Carolina. So you have Carolina basketball. So everybody's just basketball crazy. Well, they turned somehow he convinced the elders at that church that they should turn his backyard into a full court basketball court. And so they asphalted the whole backyard and put up a full court run. And so we would be there playing ball multiple days a week. We'd be hanging out at his house, eating his cereal, drinking his drinks. I, we laugh with him. I was texting with him last night, actually. And we laugh about how we ate him out of house of home, for a couple of years. But his love and his care and his concern and his pouring into us, it left such a big impact that, quite frankly, I looked at his life and I said, I want to do what Tim does.
I love
I
that.
want to be what Tim is, right? Because Tim was so effectively living out a godly example and his relationship with Christ that it was so exemplary that I desired it for my own life. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I'm sure some part of it is like I want to take kids to Carowinds and
Yeah.
go to Six Flags and go to the water park and like all this stuff seems fun. Take them to camp,
Yeah. Have a basketball court in your
it,
backyard, the little things.
yeah, have a full court, run in your back court in your backyard. Sounds awesome, and all those things were awesome in my years in youth ministry. I loved that until God sort of pushed me in different directions. But
Sure.
that was that was really a big part of the desire. There was no voice from heaven. There was no parting of the clouds. It wasn't anything like that. I don't think that I was uniquely skilled necessarily. I just think it was God saying, "Look, this is what you're going to do, and here's what I'm showing you in your life to help you get some affirmation that you can do this.
Sure.
You could be a part of that." So
Yeah.
that's sort of my story on that end.
Yeah, I love that. And I love from the youth ministry standpoint, but really all discipleship is presence, right? It's being there, it's being connected to people in where they are. And I love that I had a youth minister very similar to that just said, I'm just going to be present. I'm just going to be here. You can be crazy. You can be wild, or I'm going to take you on camps. I'm going to do this all nighters. I'm going to do all the things, but I just want you to know that somebody's going to be consistently in your life that loves you. And that was so valuable for me, and I'm thankful for our church, right? And the leaders we have in our student ministry are amazing, and I'm thankful for the way that they're impacting our community. So let's take a little bit of a pivot here. Talk about from a kind of layperson, practically, what practices or habits have you found for yourself that are really important in helping build your faith?
Mm. Yeah, I think for me, sort of, I have to take it just a little bit away from the lay part because, of course, being in full time ministry now for 25 years. But what I have found for me is that I spend a lot of time in the Word for work.
Sure.
I'm writing sermons, I'm studying, I'm prepping for Wednesday night lessons and leading my group on Wednesday and various things like that, as I know that I have to be especially attentive to my own devotional life. And so I am really intentional about every day being in the Word of God that has nothing to do with writing a sermon or prepping for a message. So that is just a unique thing for me. But what
Sure.
I would say is that is still applicable for everyone. Your personal devotional life, you should not, cannot shortchange it and expect to grow and expect to have your discipleship, you know, be deeper, gain more authenticity. For me to be able to stand in a pulpit in my particular role on a Sunday, I have to have a serious personal devotional life because that's a sense of accountability for myself. I could just prep the message. I could just study for the message, and that could be the only thing I did. And nobody, most people would never have any idea. They'd never know
Yeah.
if I didn't have a personal devotional. But I would know, and more importantly, God would know, and it would limit my personal growth and connection to God because it would create unnecessary distance there. And it wouldn't be because God was creating distance. It would be because I was creating distance by not taking that part of my life seriously.
Sure.
So I would just say that's where the application comes for the layperson. You have never arrived. You are always in or should be in a growth mindset when it comes to your spiritual life. As you know, we sat and studied Hebrews chapter 5 last night, and towards the end of that chapter, the very last verses, it talks about this idea of moving beyond milk
Mhm.
and being and partaking in solid food. And when we are partaking in that solid food, we are taking righteousness seriously.
Yeah.
So are we going to take the deeper things of God and the growth process that is involved in our personal discipleship seriously. So, I know that it's almost cliche to say to somebody, hey, have a devotional life. But the truth is, you just can't discount it. For your own personal growth and your walk with the Lord.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I remember when I first started teaching in late high school, early college, it was, I'm just going to study my lesson, and that's going to be
Yeah,
my quiet time. And,
yeah,
and I had a mentor at that time say, yeah, you need to separate those two. It needs to be, and I love kind of the way you differentiated that, is because you teach a lot during the week, and you have multiple things that you're preparing for in deep studies that could be considered. I mean, you're still studying God's word, but
sure.
there's a part of your relationship with the Lord that He's revealing things to you that sometimes are just meant for you.
Hmm.
That they're not meant for you to be sharing from stage. Maybe not that week, maybe not that month, maybe it's not that year.
Hmm.
So I love that you're taking that approach. What advice would you have for somebody who may be struggling in their faith? They're seeking to deepen their spiritual journey. I mean, obviously you've got your quiet time, you've got
Hmm.
kind of the cadence of being in God's word. That's definitely a starting place. But do you have any other advice that you would share?
Yeah, that's always such a loaded question, right? Because it, in so many cases, it depends on specifically how or why that person is struggling with their faith. Some people have gone through trauma, or some people have been distant from God for some long period of time. Some of it is spiritual atrophy. So, of course, all of those things play into the answer. But in a broad sense, I would say if a person is struggling with their faith, one of the best things they can do is serve somebody else
Okay.
and serve in God's name. Because what happens is when you start to distance yourself just a little bit in a healthy way from your own need and instead start meeting the needs of other people, in every circumstance I've seen, as long as a person doesn't take that to an extreme and burn themselves out, 'cause don't do that,
Sure.
right? But when you start to serve other people, you meet, God meets you there, and you meet God there, because he hadn't moved, he hadn't gone
Yeah.
anywhere. That's an important thing to remember, of course, in that whole relationship thing. But when you start serving other people, it puts your own life and needs, desires, wants, etc. It really starts to put all that into perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
And through that service, you are drawn nearer to God. Um, I think the other thing I would say is continue to preach the gospel to yourself every day,
Okay.
because sometimes a person is struggling in their faith because they don't feel good enough. If that's a specific issue, that's why I kind of
Sure.
began with a little caveat in my answer here. But if you're in a place where you're feeling distant from God because you've not felt good enough, sometimes what you need to do is repeat that simple truth of the gospel to yourself every morning when you wake up. There's not anything that I can do today to make God love me more, and there is nothing I can do today to make him love me less when
Yeah.
I am in him, when I'm in relationship with him, right? When I know him, when I've become a new creation because of Christ saving me, then I'm saved in him. And so because of that, not going to make him love me less today, not going to make him love me more today. I am loved, I am valued. He knows me. He knows what I'm going through. If I'm struggling, take it to him. If I'm feeling like I'm on top of the world, take it to him and ask him to keep me humble, right?
Yeah.
It's like all of those things, I think, are a part of getting our faith connection sort of rekindled, if you will.
Yeah. I love that. And I know for me in my faith journey, as I've grown closer to the Lord, anytime that I'm feeling unworthy, it's, if I'm true with myself, if I'm honest with myself, a lot of times it's more of a selfish thing for myself that I feel like I am unique. My sin is just worse than everyone else's. and it's all sin that separates us from the Lord. And I'm not any more special than anyone else, right? I'm not some unique thing. And we were talking in our small group this past week. He who knew no sin became sin so that we might become the righteousness of God, that we didn't earn that. We didn't deserve that Christ took our place in that, and that's what he gave us. And it's such a powerful, humbling, awe-inspiring reminder. And I love that idea of preaching that self to yourself daily, that we should be transformed by the renewal of our mind. And we do that daily. And I love that. So what's a recent passage of scripture, book, podcast, something that's really inspired you, that just kind of lit your heart on fire?
Yeah, I would say that really for me right now, studying in the book of Hebrews with our church has been really, really good for me because it's pushed me. Sometimes I can fall into that old trap myself of feeling like I've arrived, and then God uses a book like Hebrews to humble me.
Yeah.
So that's been really good. Is that last night we wrestled with who was Melchizedek, and that's one of those things that pushes and challenges me. Those kinds of things, these things that don't necessarily have clear answers. So I would say, just in general, the study of that book has been one of the things that's pushed me. I'm sure when we get to the book of Revelation, it'll do the same thing again. I've taught through it before, but every time I come at it, I just know all the ways it's going to challenge me. So I would say those are the two, or that is at least at the core for me of something that's really been pushing me. I continue to have as my life verse James chapter 1, verse 22: do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves, but do what it says. For me, that is a verse that I use day in and day out to keep me, I don't know, humble, level, um, from falling into any kind of hubris of thinking that, uh, I don't need to continue to watch my life and my walk.
Sure.
So I think that's a good thing for me. Those are really at the core. I've been reading a lot of different things in preparation for various studies we have coming up, but I would say that's at the heart for me.
I love that. So talk to me about like how you intentionally share your faith. How would you encourage somebody who's hesitant to do that?
Sure. Yeah. When you are a 50-50 introvert, extrovert like me, it's funny because as I get older, my percentage has probably gone from like 75 to 80% extrovert
Okay.
to 50-50.
Okay.
You find yourself adapting how you approach some of those things, because I think probably when I was younger, it was a little bit easier. But I've always been a person that doesn't handle awkwardness well. I'm about to be really transparent here. I don't do well with awkward.
Okay.
Like I struggled to watch back in the day. I struggled to watch American Idol in the first few weeks because I couldn't handle the people who were really awkward, because I felt so bad for them.
Yeah.
It wasn't because I couldn't listen to them singing terribly. It was because their awkwardness made me uncomfortable. So one of the things that God does in me, both because of my, partially introverted nature and my trepidation at awkward moments and times, is he has to continue to push me, right? He has to, and the good news is for me, because of what I do, there is an ingrained like, hey, buddy, get off your butt.
Mhm.
You don't get to not be an intentional evangelist. So that's a long caveat, and also purposeful transparency for the people out there that this stuff is not easy for them. The extroverted side of that, is not easy for a lot of people because that's not how they're wired. And so I get it. But I do two things. One, I hold myself accountable and to say, when you get these opportunities to share, speak, say something, do something. And it's okay to do your best to not make it awkward. I
Sure.
try that partially because, and you know this, I also believe that if I can have a natural conversation with someone that isn't awkward, I actually have a better chance of reaching them.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's intentional. But the other thing I do is I pray for opportunities. I'm not going to say I do it daily because that's probably not true. I pray for it regularly with the Lord, especially when I'm going into public places like our watering hole here in Jefferson is Kroger.
Okay.
So for me, and by watering hole, I mean the well, right?
Yeah.
Back in 2000 years ago, you went to the well, that's where people were. A watering hole is probably more like a bar. That's not what I meant. Just
Just
everybody,
to clarify,
maybe
just yeah,
you can edit that out, Matt.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Just kidding. You can leave it in there.
yeah.
But what I mean is, going to the well, going to where people are. And Abby and I, my wife, we talk about that. Our trips to the well, whether it's there or a coffee house or lunch or wherever it is that I might find myself out in the community. I try to be very intentional about when I go to those places. Lord, will you please open a door for me to have a natural conversation with someone about you? Because that bridges the gap between my fear of awkwardness and my sometimes introverted nature. Again, I'm 50-50.
Sure.
And that the Lord would be so present in those moments that he would create authentic conversation that could then lead me to an opportunity to share my faith, which, quite frankly, in those circumstances happens less than it is somebody else sharing something with me that I might then have an opportunity to offer to pray for them or to invite them to church or to let them know about a group that's going on that could help them because of what they're dealing with. See, those are natural, right? Those are natural opportunities to share.
Yeah.
So that's a long answer, but I feel like for me to be honest and authentic in that, I feel like I needed to speak longer on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I appreciate your approach to that. I really like the perspective of the watering hole, right? I mean, it's funny about the bar, but more intentionally, it's the congregation place.
That's right.
It's where you're coming in contact with the community. We had a church that we served at for a long time, and there was a sign as you exited the parking lot of the church, and it said, "You're now entering your mission field." And I love
Mhm.
that. I love that perspective of we're called as the church to go out into the world and make disciples, and to having that perspective of Lord, open up opportunities. I love that, and I hope that we will all do a better job of being open to when He gives us those opportunities and as the Spirit moves. Um, so what is something if you look at like your kids? So you have three kids. What is a way that you looked in to seek to pass on your faith to them?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that, kind of two core elements, and there's probably a lot of answers to that, but the two core elements is one, simply their involvement in church
Okay.
and in a godly, loving, caring youth group, right?
Okay.
That has been from, like you and I, they've been drugged to church, especially as pastor kids, since the beginning. So all of them have that. We try to also just have a lot of authentic conversations with them about why we are not just going to church, but why we are the church. And that we're not, none of us are auditing church. We are really the verbiage in our house for a long time has been walking with the Lord.
Cool.
So it's not going to church or being a part of a youth group. The differentiating line in there is we want you guys to walk with the Lord. The most important thing for us as your parents is that you walk with the Lord.
Yeah.
If you miss youth group or you miss a Sunday at church or something, and we don't want our kids to do that any more than I want to do that because I love being with the Lord's people. But that's not the end all be all. What is the end all be all is that you are authentically day in and day out walking with the Lord. That's what we want, because that is indicative of an authentic relationship with him that is deeper than just checking a box that says, I went to youth group
Yeah.
or I went to church and sat in a pew. We want your relationship to be truly that, a relationship.
Yeah.
And so we've tried to have those conversations with our kids, and we don't try. We have intentionally had those conversations with our kids. And then, it's the Old Testament practice of talking about the Lord and walking with the Lord as we're coming and we're going, and I
Yeah.
don't remember the exact verse, but it's the idea of, in your comings and goings, share, bind it on your hearts, bind it on your foreheads, that in everything that you do, let it be reflective of what you say your faith is. So just trying to model in the home godliness and love, care, being careful how we speak about fellow brothers and sisters in Christ
Sure.
in our home, modeling for them. We're not going to sit around and kvetch about church people that are bugging us. We're not going to do that, right? We're going to be, because of course that never happens. But
Never.
we're
No one ever upsets you. I understand.
never happened. But we're going to be really careful about that kind of stuff, because we don't want them to ever get the impression that just because people are challenging, because, oh, by the way, all people are challenging no matter what background you're
Yeah.
in, that they then get that kind of convoluted and think, well, okay, this is what being a part of a church is somebody kvetching about, their church or their church people. And like,
Sure.
no, we try to talk up how much we love the church and how much we love the people and how good they are to us or have been to us, and how we love those relationships, having those families in our home, and all those things we've done. And we haven't been perfect about any of that stuff that I just mentioned, but that's the goal.
I love that. And you said several months ago now at church about the plaque that someone had, I think, on their mantle that said "Absent friends are welcome here" or "safe
Yeah.
here," and that has been something that I've said that specific phrase maybe 100 times since you said that. I've said it in conversations. I've said it to our staff. I've said it to Hannah. I will catch myself getting into the mode of, man, it's just so much easier to talk about this person and vent, or say I'm venting, but really I'm gossiping, and that'll come to mind. I say, nope, you know what? I'm not going to talk about that. We're ending this conversation here. So I love that. But I also love the point that you made about let's walk with the Lord, that it's not about our church attendance score, right? We're not getting graded on a rubric of a report card. It's not, did you read your Bible today? Did you go to youth group today? Did you pray today? Did you listen to 5 worship songs? That it's, are you walking with the Lord? And that looks different in different seasons, but it is an intimacy that's built in the relationship over time. And I love that idea. I benefited individually from my parents. I saw them walk with the Lord, and I saw the faith that they had that showed up on a Sunday morning was the same faith that they had that showed up Thursday afternoon. And I had so many friends that I was involved in church with that I grew up with, and their parents were very different. And it was just the way they lived their life. They came to church on Sunday. It kind of felt like growing up in the Bible Belt, that's what people do. You go to church on Sunday. A lot of business happens at church. You see people. It's a community. Okay, yeah, we're go to church maybe a couple of times a month, but then the rest of the week, our life has not changed. And I look back on those friends, and I see so many of them that have, quote unquote, walked away from the faith. That they're not living a life in their faith. They're not living out their faith. And so I appreciate you saying that. And that's definitely a prayer for our boys, is that we will be intentional to walk with the Lord. This is not just
Cultural Christianity is a real threat in the South.
yeah,
You
yeah, it
It's,
definitely is.
it is very easy to be a cultural Christian. It is an entirely different thing to walk with the Lord.
Amen.
They could not be more different,
Yeah, amen.
So it
So
is
let's end
part of
on this. What advice, if you had to yourself, if you could go back 10 years ago, and I know you've been at Galilee longer than that, but if you could go back probably 10 years ago, what kind of advice would you give to yourself specifically around your faith?
Mm, 10 years ago. Yeah. I think it would probably be relax.
Okay.
Relax. One of the best things that's ever happened for me in ministry, and I think even from, ultimately it ends up impacting my faith and my walk with the Lord, is this idea that I can't control everything.
Yeah.
And I think early in ministry, I really felt like I had to, or that it was my responsibility. And that if something wasn't going well, then it was a reflection on me, like I was a bad leader or a bad Christian, or, wasn't good enough or whatever. The more that I have gosh, this is going to sound cliche. The more that I have let go and have let God,
Yeah.
because that is
Yeah. Yeah.
cliche,
Yeah. Yeah.
the way, way better I have been and our church has been. The less it is like you can draw a line of where I finally sort of gave up and said, okay, Lord, I'm going to stop trying to do this my own way and just do whatever it is I genuinely believe you want me to do, and trust that that's enough, and then rest in that's enough. That's all I got to do, right? If I will just trust that what you want is actually better than what I want, and that I will trust that what that is enough, and that I don't have to do more than that. I can just do what it is you want, and that's good. You could draw a line in our ministry on this side from here to there, and you'd see so much more fruit. It's not that there was no fruit here, because there was,
Yeah.
but there's so much more fruit on this side of the line. And oh, by the way, I'm way healthier.
Yeah.
I'm way spiritually healthier. I'm a better dad. I'm a better man. I'm a better husband. I'm a better friend. I'm a better pastor, because quite honestly, I'm not holding on so tightly. And I'm recognizing the one that holds on to me is better. He's more. He's better at this than I am
Yeah.
in an infinite way. And it seems so, you're like, duh, right? Well, of course, but we're human, and we try to do a lot of stuff our own way.
Yeah.
And the Lord has a way of humbling us in that, and that's a good thing.
That he does. That he does. Yeah, there's a lot of reliance on ourselves and our own abilities that we like to drum up and feel like we're good enough to be able to be relied upon. And I love that. Just find some time to rest. Well, Nick, thank you very much for coming on Belief Builders today and sharing your story and encouraging us, sharing some wisdom. We'll be praying for you and for Galilee and the ministry. I do want to make mention, yesterday there was a tragedy happened in a close neighborhood, and at Appalachia High School there was a shooting, and I just wanted to say, thank you for the way that you're leading our community and the way you're leading in our students and across our community as a whole, and trying to be the active hands and feet of Jesus and loving in the way that you're leading in that. So I appreciate very much you doing that.
Of course. Yeah, we're obviously praying deeply for them, and our hearts are with so many that are caught up in this. And boy, it's just a lot of threads amongst our people and some of our other leaders within our church and within our community that we have a relationship with. Our hearts are with them as well, because they're leading so many more others than I am right now, and so I'm praying for them too. But I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. Well, thank you again for your time. Thank you, everybody, for following along with us, and we will see you soon. Thanks. God bless. We're so glad you could join us on this episode of Belief Builders. We hope today's discussion has strengthened your spirit and encouraged you in your own journey of faith. Be sure to follow along for more uplifting stories. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share this podcast with friends and family. Let us know in the comments if there's someone whose faith journey you would love to hear. We're always eager to share more stories that inspire and uplift. Until next time, keep building a faith that guides your decisions.